All right, let's give this a whirl. Let's see if I can get a voice down on here without screwing it up too bad or having too many outside noises like planes, trains, and automobiles being tossed into the video as well. But this is the final project, and I didn't do the entire project. I just don't think that people are interested in checking that out. But I'm working with the Keda liquid alcohol dye kit, but I will be showing how I ended up coming up with the color formulation. And I'm working with acetone as a base. So I am using 6 ounces of the acetone, and I will also be adding 1/4 teaspoon of a stain additive. This video and another video is the final testing on that, so that should be done shortly. That's just going to help slow down and reduce the evaporation process, especially when working with like an acetone or a denatured alcohol. But I'll get more into that in the future. So I end up adding 1/2 teaspoon of the Keda liquid amber dye. Now, that 1/4 teaspoon of the additive is not going to change the color a whole lot. So you can still use this formula and it's going to be very, very similar in color. But anyways, I end up adding 5 drops of the brown and 3 drops of the red. I also ended up going, my target for this was a darker amber color. So that was the cloth that I ended up using for the entire clock. A lot of times what I'll do is when I'm done with a project, I'll toss it into a bucket, or in my case, I have a very large measuring cup that I have probably about 50 pieces of cloth that are all different colors. So say that I end up doing a blue project, and then I'll dig through that cup and I'll pull out another blue. Like a cloth that has the blue that I've used in a previous project, and then I'll just use that same one. Even, it already has some blue dye on it, so it's not gonna affect the color, but it's just something that you can do for the purposes of the video. I don't ever do that, just so you guys don't think I'm using some type of wizardry or magic or something like that for the coloring process. I always end up using a clean cloth, and just to try to show the straight color coming right off of the cloth itself onto the wood. The other thing is that I did not fast time any of this clock face or the clock face mount for this video, just so you can get a good visual of what I did in real time, how long it took me to do it, which probably isn't a very fair standard either, because even I get mesmerized by these. By coloring wood with these dyes and things like that. It's like one of those relaxation videos, or what are those called, the satisfaction videos. That's kind of satisfying to me, is watching the wood color with these dyes. So sometimes I even overwork it and put down more than I should or really need, but that's just me. Anyways, so that's why I didn't fast time any of this, just so people can get a good understanding of the actual application process. Like on these edges, I probably went a little more than I needed to. For the wood prep on this piece, I ended up sanding it with 150, a 220 grit, and then I ended up burning I took a torch and then I burned the deeper grains of the oak. And then I mixed up a wood grain filler, and I thinned it out by about 60 to 70%. I made it fairly thin because I wanted to keep the texture. I just think that it looks really cool, especially as a wall decor clock and things like that. But and then I ended up coloring that wood grain filler with some black. It wasn't a very dark concentrate or anything like that, just a couple of drops. I'm gonna say, it was the entire clock, so I did about a 1/8 teaspoon in a good chunk of the wood grain filler and watered it down, and then I applied it, let it dry, scraped off the excess, let it dry, then sanded it with the 220 grit, and then I ran some polyurethane. I just sprayed a very light coat of the poly over it, and then I just did another quick sand, a hand sand with 220 grit, just to try to lock the color down, and I didn't want it to end up lifting. I don't think it would at all because it's actually mixed in with the wood grain filler. But here's where I ended up doing a second coat. Now my thought process on that was that it was just going to end up darkening this color, and because I used the brown began to start overpowering the amber color. I put a little bit too much in there. If I would have just left it with a one coat, it would have been perfect. But because I ended up going over it with the secondary coat, the brown was overpowering the amber color, shifting it more towards the brown. So when this dries out, it turns much darker than I was looking for, which would probably been a really cool color as well, honestly, but I just wanted to keep it a lighter color. This was a clock that was going to be for my daughter, and the clock face was off of another clock. You know, the clock has some history to it. So anyways, that's just something totally different, but I'll get into that later. Now, I took my hot air gun and just accelerated the drying process because the stain additive slowed down the drying process a little bit with the acetone. Typically the acetone will evaporate right away, but I just took the hot air gun and started to accelerate the drying process. Now, as you can see there, it went darker. So I wanted it, for the purposes of what I was looking for, to have it a little bit lighter. Like I said, it would have been a cool color either way, but I just wanted it to have a little bit lighter color. So even no matter what color that it ends up, you can still shift it or modify the color with this technique. By, here I just took some yellow, of the yellow powder, and I mixed it in with maybe an ounce or two. I think it was 2 ounces of just water, and it was just a straight yellow. And I just went over the top of the entire piece just to try to lighten it up. You can't really tell as much right now, but once it dries out, it's going to lighten up quite a bit. So I'm just making sure that everything's lined up, the holes that I ended up drilling, and just to see how it all fits together in that part there. There's the back side. I already have the wood anchors attached, and then now I'm just running over this with the polyurethane, and I'll give it a couple of good coats here and run through it. So the clock face itself, like I said, it has some history. It was part of the clock was pulled out, and I traced this off of the template and things like that, and but I wanted to kind of dress the clock face up a little bit, so I'm gonna end up showing in the video a little bit later on what I ended up doing there. This is 220 grit, the sanding sponge, which ended up getting into the deeper grooves of the oak because I didn't use the wood filler to level it. I just wanted it to help enhance the oak grains. And then I went over the surface wood with the 600 grit, not the wood, the sealer, I'm sorry. So this is like the in-between coat sealing process. And that's what I ended up using to do the between coat sanding for this final coat of the polyurethane. This is what I was talking about, where I ended up kind of dressing up the clock face a bit. It's like I said, it's an older clock. It's been around for a long time. So I can say. So when I get to the glass dome portion of this, you'll end up seeing the actual color that these started out with. And so what I did was I took some spar urethane, some of the stain powder, and I went with the water-based spar urethane. I took about a pea size of the yellow stain powder, mixed it in with a little bit of purified water, and then added some spar urethane to it. And then I took the airbrush and I went around the edges. Now the reason I went with the spar and the water base was, one, I wanted to keep it a brighter color. So I could have done it with the liquid dye if I had just added a drop or two to that, but I just ended up having some already mixed up. So if you wanted to see what the portion was, it was in a previous video where I ended up doing the yellow stain powder, and I just had some of that left. That's being honest with you. So that's the color that it started out with. And also the other reason too that I ended up using the water-based spar urethane. So if I got any excess on that clock face, I didn't know what those numbers and the decorative portions of that inking was actually made of, what the base of it was, and I didn't want to destroy it. So if I went with like a colored lacquer or something, I would have had to have used like a lacquer thinner or denatured alcohol, acetone, something to take that excess spray off. But by using the water base, I could just take water and then it removed the excess spray very nicely. And it didn't do any damage to the clock numbers or the ornamental design or anything like that. So it just cleaned up really nice. Anyways, this is the final part. This is the final project, kind of showing how it turned out. There's 3 coats of polyurethane. Yeah, 3 coats. Well, there's 1 very light coat, and then 3 coats on top of that. And then I did a between coat sand on the second coat with the 220 grit sponge and the 600 grit fine grit sandpaper. So in total, the clock is 3.5 feet tall. With the wings from the furthest part of the wingspan is 2.5 feet. But you can see that there's those hinges that are on there. Those hinges were actually very similar to the clock dome, the outer ring, and I just sprayed 1 light coat of the colored sealer over the top of that. Now I could have ended up going a little bit heavier and brighten those up, but I really wanted to keep this more of a neutral color. I didn't want it to be anything that was like blasting out. It's going to be on a wall, so I really just kind of wanted to keep it more of a subtle coloring. But I thought it blended it in nice. And there's 4 mirrors in total. There's 1 mirror on the wing, 1 mirror on the other wing, 1 larger mirror in the center, and 1 on the bottom towards the foot of the bottom of the clock there. And then there's that 1 shelf that's standing about 3/4 from where my hands are now down. And that one is a little bit lighter yellow. I just wanted to have a little bit of contrast to it. You can kind of do however you want to do with yours. But yeah, there's a TikTok on there, or not a TikTok, I'm sorry, we call it a TikTok, a pendulum. Oh man. A pendulum on the, that runs over that mirror, that works. Yay. I ended up having to buy a new clock internals for it because the pendulum wasn't swinging the way that it should. So I just replaced the back. And everything else is still the original off of that, the other one that I pulled all those components off of. But anyways, I really hope that you guys get something from this video. Sorry that, if there's some outside noises, and yeah, I know my shop's a little bit messy. I'm actually in the process of moving. I'm going to try to, get a little bigger space, and that's coming up very fast. So hopefully that this video, maybe the next will be the last videos I do here, and I will end up in a different area. And then maybe you guys can, take a journey through my shop, and maybe you'll even see my ugly mug, but I'm not sure about that because I don't want to scare anybody away. So that was the formula. That's the products I ended up using. And I really hope that you guys enjoyed it, took something from it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it.